Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are discussing the assassination of Robert Kennedy, brother to President John Kennedy. He was a U.S. Senator and candidate in the 1968 Democratic Party presidential primaries. On June 5th, 1968, RFK was shot by Saran at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California. Or that's the story they want you to believe. Mark Shaw is a former criminal defense attorney and TV network trial analyst. A noted historian and investigative reporter, he has published more than 30 books. Today, Mark will explain why Saran was not the killer, who he has found to be the most likely killer, and why it's not the CIA. All of this can also be found in his book, Abuse of Power. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited to learn more about Robert Kennedy's assassination because I've done a deep dive into John Kennedy, but not his brother.
Yeah, and that's interesting because Danielle, I never expected to write this book.
I was gonna
Uh,
ask, like, what led you here?
yeah, I think you saw the array of my books that touch on the JFK assassination, Dorothy Kilgallen, all of that. And after the last one, I kind of it helps a little bit to put some of this in context, if I may. I
Please.
started in by writing a book about Melvin Belli, who was Jack Ruby's lawyer. I practiced law with him in the 1980s. And I knew him very well, and I knew about his affiliations with the mafia. So
Okay.
I wrote called Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom, and then I was done. But then I learned that he was involved with Mickey Cohen, who was a gangster at the time, and that Belli may have known about the assassination before it happened.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things that kind of made me go forward. Also, then I looked into the 1960 election. You're way too young to remember, but Joe Kennedy had the idea that he wanted to be president in the United States, and unfortunately, when he was ambassador to Great Britain, during that term, he became friends, unfortunately, with Adolf Hitler.
Mm.
And that really ruined his reputation. When he came back to the United States, he knew he couldn't become president, so he decided Joe Kennedy Jr. will be president, although he died then in the war.
Hmm.
Then Jack, then Bobby, and then Ted. He saw a real dynasty of Kennedys in the White House.
So he wanted
And
them all to be president.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So I looked at the 60 election, and Joe knew they were going to lose because Richard Nixon was ahead and so on and so forth. So Joe incorporated some of the people he knew from his bootlegging days, including Carlos Marcello, Traficante, all the bad guys, and they helped him win the elections in West Virginia and Illinois.
Hmm.
Deal was, you help us win, we'll leave you alone when we get in the White House.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't happen because Bobby Kennedy, and a lot of that comes from this book right here, which changed everything about what happened to the subjects of my research in the past. It was called The Enemy Within by Bobby Kennedy. And you can just get an idea of what these mafioso must have thought when they read that he wrote, "They are sleek, often bilious and fat, or lean and cold and hard. They have smooth faces and cruel eyes of gangsters. They wear the same rich clothes, the diamond ring, the jeweled watch, and get this one, the strong, sickly, sweet smelling perfume."
Mm.
Bobby Kennedy went after these guys because of what had happened at racketeering hearings before JFK became president. Those mafioso took the Fifth Amendment and so on and so forth. And Bobby Kennedy then was going to dedicate himself to erasing them from the face of the earth.
Did he know
So
about his dad's connection with the mafia at that point?
what's that?
Did did Bobby Kennedy know about his dad's connections with the mafia?
Excellent question. Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And he knew about the fixed election in '60.
Yeah.
So now we turn to 1961 when they're in office. And the first thing that Bobby Kennedy does is something that just amazing that he tried to do it. But he went ahead and he deported this Carlos Marcello, who was a probably the most dangerous mafioso in the country at that time, New Orleans and everything. We'll get into that.
Hmm.
But he deported him to Central America. He tricked him into going to an immigration office in New Orleans, and he sent him to Central America, where Marcello almost died.
Wow.
So I took that information and then I started looking into Marcello's possible participation in JFK's death at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the real key was my finding out about a woman named Dorothy Kilgallen,
Mm-hmm.
who was a famous journalist at the time. A lot of people don't know too much about her, but and I didn't at the time. She was a college dropout. I think you'll be impressed if you don't know already that she had to overcome gender discrimination, sexual discrimination when she became a reporter. They wouldn't let her handle many of the important cases at the time.
I believe it.
And so, she had to battle her way into getting noticed and so on and so forth. She was a newspaper woman who was syndicated to 200 newspapers across the country.
Wow.
She had a radio show listened to by 1 million people, and many people, again, you're probably too young to remember, but the big show she was on was What's My Line, which was a quiz show CBS had every Sunday night at 10 o'clock live. Dorothy was the star performer.
Okay.
They guessed unusual occupations for people and things like that. So she was the real deal. And before JFK died, she had become very good friends with him. He had come to her home on East 68th Street, played charades. They saw each other socially. Jackie Kennedy was there. I think Bobby Kennedy was even there. I mean, this was a big deal that Dorothy was the socialite at that time. So she became friends with him to the point where at one point he invited her and her youngest son, Kerry, to the White House.
Oh, wow.
And while we were there, JFK came into the library. He made a fuss over Kerry, gave him a PT 109 pin and all that, and then praised him for the letters that he brought from his third grade class. In fact, when JFK dies, the first column that Dorothy writes contains this language. What I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy, praising him for the letters he brought from his third grade class. This is the man who was assassinated in Dallas. So Dorothy made this personal. And she went to Dallas and she interviewed, first of all, the Dallas police chief, and this will all come back for us to talk about Bobby Kennedy. But his book, I found, which is a very rare book in some archives, and it's his story.
Okay.
And she found out right away from Jesse Curry. He said to her, the shots came from the front, not from the back. They came from the overpass or the grassy knoll. And so she knew that. She then interviewed a detective who was with Jack Ruby when he was arrested, and found out that Ruby was very calm after. I'm sorry, Ruby was very nervous after he shot Oswald, but then when he found out Oswald was dead, he was very calm, and that will come back for our talks when we lead into Sirhan and
Okay.
Robert Kennedy's death. So she found out all of this. She did her research, and the very first column that she wrote was called "The Oswald Alone Must Not File." She was on the job. She was in Dallas. She went to the Jack Ruby trial. There is a photograph at the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. It's in the book. She's standing in the middle of the courtroom at the Dr. Sam Shepard case, which became the Fugitive movie, and all the other reporters are around her, looking at her in admiration because she had the trust. She was a woman of the truth. And I would say, just a little research I've done about you, you're like that, where you're always looking for the truth. No, I mean that, and
Thank
I
you.
admire that. So she wrote the Oswald file must not close about Oswald because she didn't believe about the Oswald doing it, him being the lone gunman.
Yeah.
And she wrote in there, they've killed the president. The government is not prepared to tell us the truth, and I'm going to do everything in my power to find out what happened.
Oh, man. And they did not want that to happen.
Not at all.
I was going to
So
ask you
she
about
right away,
Dorothy because I didn't know her story at all. So I'm glad that you're getting into this.
yeah, and she just put a target on her back, obviously there, because you've got powerful men like J. Edgar Hoover shouting out Oswald alone. This mafioso, Carlos Marcello, who had, we'll go back to that for a minute. 1961 comes around, and then we'll get to 1963, and Carlos Marcello has been deported to Central America. He comes back in the United States, as a famous author told me that the Sicilian's middle name is Revenge. And when he got back, he wanted to kill the SOB, as he put it, Robert Kennedy, but he knew if he did that, JFK and the government would come after him with everything they had.
Right.
So he set it up to orchestrate the death of JFK in Dallas, and you say you've already looked into all of that. So he did that, and that eliminated JFK, so Bobby Kennedy would be powerless. All right, and that was the effect of him doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find out now that I put in this book, nobody I don't think has ever put in context the death of JFK in 60, well, actually Marilyn Monroe in 61 or 62, but JFK in 63, Dorothy in 65, and Robert Kennedy in 1968. So you can see the parallels between how these deaths occurred and using, in my opinion, in my research, these patsies that come along, Oswald first, Ruby, and so on and so forth. So
Do you
as we get,
think the Kennedys killed Marilyn Monroe?
you want to stop there? We certainly can get into that. Yes.
I
Uh,
just have, I thought I'd ask the question since
No, no,
this is
that's just
brought up.
fine. So let's go there because it's Bobby Kennedy all over again.
Yeah.
Marilyn Monroe was Dorothy Kilgallen's involved in this
Okay.
because she and Marilyn were very good friends. And the day that Marilyn died, Dorothy Kilgallen wrote an article that said Marilyn Monroe is on the upswing. She's got Broadway offers, movie offers, and she's involved in a romantic relationship with someone whose name is stronger than Joe DiMaggio, who was the great baseball player she had been married to.
Right.
And so she wrote that about Marilyn, believing that Marilyn was doing just fine. She also mentioned that Marilyn had just moved into a house. She had always wanted, she had a tough time growing up. She had a tough time with the men in Hollywood trying to use her
Mm-hmm.
and all that. She finally became a star and was able to go ahead and buy this home in Brentwood, California, near UCLA. And so Dorothy said, she had everything to live for. That same day, the headlines across the world were Marilyn Monroe commits suicide. And Dorothy did not believe that at all. So I started looking into that for a book called Collateral Damage by connecting Bobby Kennedy, um, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was able to find out was, and a lot of this, I know you're interested in conspiracies where unfortunately distortions of history occur. I
Mm-hmm.
think the good Lord put me on the earth to find these distortions and try to eliminate them. And one of them was all about Dorothy or Marilyn before and this and that up in Lake Tahoe and the mobsters were up there and everything else like that. But the real facts were that Marilyn had made a big mistake. She had told the Kennedys that she was going to the media and she
Right.
was going to talk about the pillow talk secrets, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
may, including matters of national security,
Right.
including you probably know that JFK was looking to have Fidel Castro assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't do that with these kind of powerful men that abuse power and all of that. And so Marilyn then, and I've been able to show in my book exactly what happened. I've put Bobby Kennedy in Los Angeles, although he said he was in San Francisco. I put him in Los Angeles at the 20th Century Fox heliport where he landed. I put him in a car where a policeman in Beverly Hills stopped him for going too quickly, he and the chauffeur, and all of that. And then what I've been able to show, it's the first time I think in Collateral Damage, and now more about it in this book, is how uh, Bobby Kennedy, who went to her home allegedly, and I think he probably did, that day and tried to talk her out of going to the media. They could not
Mm-hmm.
let her go to the media. Just couldn't
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
And so he went to the home. He tried to talk her out of. She wouldn't listen. And then I'm very proud of the fact that I find these witnesses that nobody else does because it makes an awful lot of difference.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
and I hear from people all around the world. There's almost 15 million views of my presentations about all my books, the last four especially, on YouTube. And I hear from people then who've watched those, and we'll talk about a couple of them in depth. But this woman, a nurse in Boston, got in touch with me. She knew the Kennedy family. She had gone skiing with them. She knew JFK, Ted, and Bobby, and all of them. And she sold some, and even Joe. and she told some kind of sordid stories about them. You know, the Kennedys were good, bad, and ugly, in my opinion. They did some good things. Bobby did some good things with civil rights. JFK, I think, was going to get us out of Vietnam and things like that. But they also, I mean, she tells the story of the Kennedy, of going to a restaurant where the Kennedy family was several times, and the waitresses would bring the bill, and they would just leave without even paying it.
Oh
And these
gosh.
these are millionaires.
Yeah.
So that's I know it's a small point, but it's kind of indicative of the arrogance that they had. So I found this nurse, and she told me that she knew the two people who were involved in Marilyn Monroe's death. They were two thugs around the Boston area. In fact, they had gone ahead and eliminated this nurse's grandfather because he had crossed them up and so on and so forth.
Wow.
And she was able to say that they visited her home and they started talking about exactly what happened with Marilyn on the night she died, that they were there, and the door or the window was left open. They could get in there, and I don't want to get into too much of exactly how they killed her, but it had to do with ingesting barbiturates into her system.
Right.
And that's how Marilyn Monroe died. Now, there's been all this conjecture about everything else involved and all of that. But I think this nurse was very credible because one thing she said is, Mark, all you have to do is look at the face of Marilyn Monroe when she died. It's kind of a grovelly gray. And if you look at it, it is.
Hmm.
She said that's the indication of what I'm telling you about how they ingested these barbiturates into her system. So I believe that's what happened to Marilyn Monroe. I'm a former criminal defense lawyer, as you know,
Hmm.
so I look at motive with all of these
Right.
cases, but as I did when I was a defense lawyer. In fact, I've never had any training with actual writing skills. Maybe that would have been a good idea. But I talk to the reader like I talk to juries, like a
That makes
prosecutor.
sense.
Here's what I
Yeah.
know that way. So I put all that in a couple of the books and everything, and based on motive, Bobby Kennedy, Jack too, but Jack Kennedy had dumped her, as you know, but
Hmm.
Bobby Kennedy had a torrid love affair with her. And in the book, there is a CIA document that I have, have corroborated through other evidence, and it talks about Bobby's torrid love affair with Marilyn to the point where Marilyn thought that Bobby was going to leave Ethel and marry Marilyn.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I knew that they had an affair. I knew that both brothers had, but I didn't know that it was that intense.
So Bobby can't let Marilyn Monroe die, just as
No way.
Carlos Marcello is not going to let Bobby Kennedy become president in the United States in 1968. So that's the Marilyn story. There's more to it in the book. Readers will learn about that. But I've tried to really be careful with in my research, direct evidence and not speculate and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Because I pride myself on doing that just as I did when I was dealing with evidence in the courtroom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that since we're talking about it, I might as well bring it up. But let's move on with the Dorothy Killigan story.
Okay, so it's actually Kilgallen, but
Oh,
that's close
excuse me.
enough. Don't
Thank
worry
you.
about it. No problem. So Dorothy was on the job, okay, after JFK died. She went to Dallas. She talked to Jesse Curry. She didn't believe the Oswald alone file. She came back and she wrote, I think there are 16 columns that she wrote. They were not kind to those people who were shouting Oswald alone. And then she pulled something that really upset them because, as I prove in the book, and readers will be interesting to know, this always happens, it seems like, and I hope it will happen with your viewers. When they see something in what I say, they will then get in touch with me. They'll go to markshawbooks.com, they'll find my email, and we've got about 5,000 emails over the past few years from people all around the world, and they give me tips.
Yeah.
So this one gentleman is watching a video presentation at a library near Dallas, and he watches it, and then he emails me and said, "Mark, I need to talk to you because I knew Dorothy Kilgallen."
Oh wow.
Well, that's a big deal because it's a long time ago, and there aren't very many of those kinds of people. So he called me, and I couldn't write. I wish I could have recorded it, but I couldn't write fast enough because he told me, Mark, my name is Morris Wolf. I was an attorney in Washington, D.C. I became involved working with Bobby Kennedy. In fact, I was there when Bobby Kennedy was in the Justice Department and JFK was president. In fact, they did not trust J. Edgar Hoover to when they talked on the phone because they thought it was tapped.
Hmm.
So they asked me to go ahead, and I rode my bicycle back and forth between the Justice Department and the White House, taking secrets between the two brothers.
Wow.
And he then said, I became a legislative assistant for Senator John Sherman Cooper of, I think it's Tennessee or Kentucky, who was on the Warren Commission. Now, we should talk about that in just a minute, if you don't mind, because it
Yeah, of
figures into
course.
all of this. What my research showed was I needed to find what J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ were up to when they chose the members of the Warren Commission. This is what amazes me. You're not going to find my research in hardly any other authors in their books because they don't they still believe Oswald alone, and I obviously don't, and have
Right.
proven it. But one of the things that was amazing to me, and we're going to talk about it when we have an eyewitness who saw Sirhan just before Robert Kennedy was dead. I went to the National Archives, and I found conversations, audio tape conversations between LBJ and Hoover as to who they wanted on the commission. It's shocking. I think readers will be shocked to see. I've set it all up. Hoover says this, then LBJ says this, and all that. The bottom line is this: they were looking for nobody who was going to cause a problem with what they were doing,
Of
with
course.
Oswald alone. In one instance, they even berate the man who became president of the United States, Gerald Ford, by saying that they use that old adage, he can't think and chew gum at the same time. They want people on there like that.
Hmm.
And this Senator John Sherman Cooper was very well respected, and they put him and a senator named Richard Russell on the commission because they thought that that would give reliability to what they were going to do. They didn't know that both of those men did not agree with the Oswald alone solution, and at the end of the supposed the investigation, the final report, they demanded a dissent in there that would say they did not believe in the single bullet theory and all that other kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, it was left out. As a historian, I sometimes think how that would have changed everything. Instead of that Oswald alone craziness perpetuating to today,
Yeah.
that would have made a difference. But LBJ and Hoover put a stop to that. So this Morris Wolf then says, yeah, I knew Dorothy. And I bought this book because I don't have it with me right now. It was the Georgetown Social Club. And Senator Cooper's wife started it. People read about this. It's never been in a book before mine, this new one. And if you want me to send you a copy, I will. It's fascinating because all the people who were anything in Washington went to these meetings they had at Senator Cooper's wife's house.
Hmm, that's
All right.
interesting.
And, anybody was anybody. So Dorothy was invited because even though she lived in New York City, she was a big shot. And Morris Wolf said, well, Mark, if you can imagine, I'm sure you get shocked by things at times. I remember an aha moment.
Hmm.
He said, I sat right next to Dorothy Kilgallen for dinner.
Oh, perfect.
And I said, you did? He said, yes. And he said, it was most interesting because I knew quite a bit about her, but I didn't know how good an investigative reporter she was until she started interviewing me. And he said, and this is a quote, she was a bright light bulb. She was so smart, and she would, interrogate me in some ways, but do it in a way that I wanted to tell her about things. And I did. I explained to her a lot of things, especially about the corruption at the Warren Commission, how J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ ramrodded the other members to come up with to agree to the Oswald alone conclusion, how the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court said, we don't need to go too far into this. Let's just satisfy the public. It was kind of political theater in some
Yeah.
ways, was what that was all about. And unfortunately, then they issued their report, and everybody in the world, including me, when I was younger, thought that was the gospel because we trusted the government back then. We didn't ask questions and everything. And that's going to be one of the things I'll talk about toward the end of our conversation about people have to question the government,
Yeah. Oh,
especially in this
100%.
time. But they didn't back then, and Dorothy Kilgallen was the only one that did. So we go ahead then and with Dorothy. because she made her big mistake. Just like Marilyn said, that I'm going to go to the media. She made an agreement, a contract with Random House to write a book, a tell-all book about the assassination, naming names, Marcello, Hoover, others, and that word got out, obviously,
Mm.
to those guys that was happening, and so she did that. And then what's most important about being Dallas, she's the only reporter out of 400, and you stop me if you have any questions, please. But there's only reporter out of 400 at the Jack Ruby trial to interview Jack Ruby.
Wow.
What's the connection there, and why did she get to do that?
Hmm.
Because another one of these facts that I found by doing my research, especially about what was going on in the Dallas at the time, Jack Ruby had a carousel club, and they played What's My Line every Sunday night.
Oh, perfect. So she,
And he
yeah.
was enamored with Dorothy Kilgallen, thought she was, a person of truth and so on and so forth. So when she waltzes up to the railing at the Jack Ruby trial, and this is all in the book, uh, he goes like this, come on over. So she talked to him and interviewed him 3 times. All right.
Wow. That's amazing.
And we do not know, by the way, and we're going to talk about her death in a little bit. We do not know exactly what he told her. Why? Because the moment she died in 1965, under mysterious circumstances, there was a raid of her apartment.
I was going
I
to ask
believe
about
it was
that.
a combination of the FBI and the mafia, including Marcello, and they stole all of her records and just investigation records and all JFK investigation records and her manuscript.
I was
They
going to
stole
ask
it.
because what happened to all that information? Because if she has all this information, it had to go somewhere. So I was curious about that.
And I've tried to find it everywhere. I tried to find FBI files, National Archives, all these kind of places. None. We can't find it. I'm going to keep after it. So anyway, she makes that mistake. But where does she go? We don't know what he said, but where does she go? She goes to New Orleans. Now, Carlos Marcello been a friend of a mafioso in New York named Frank Costello, who Dorothy knew, by the way. She
Hmm.
knew some of the mafioso in New York City. In fact, she used to have a lunch with he and some of the other uh, goombas, I guess you could call them, or whatever. It's kind of derogatory. I shouldn't say that. In the East Village, there's the restaurant called P.J. Clark's. I think that's where it is. And in fact, when I went back for a ceremony about Dorothy, I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, I sat right near where she was on the
Okay.
last night of her life. So she knew Costello. He set up Carlos Marcello in New Orleans for his gambling, for the prostitutes, for the killings. He was a very, very dangerous man, as I have proven in the new book and before. You can't mess around with those guys. If we have time, I'll tell you a personal story of mine when I was working with Good Morning America, and I interviewed the lawyer for one of the mafioso, and found out what happens to somebody when they open their mouth and shouldn't. So she did that. She went to New Orleans and she investigated. And she went to Pete Marcello, who was Marcello's brother's restaurant. She talked to people there about Marcello. She took one of her hairdressers named Mark Sinclair, who will come into view here because he's the one who found her body on November 8th, 1965. She took him with her to do her hair and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And all at once, he got a call from a payphone in downtown New Orleans. She said, "You go back to New York City. You don't tell anybody you were here, and you don't ask any more questions about what I was doing."
Wow. So she
So she
knew.
goes back to New York City, and she should have kept her mouth shut. But she starts telling her lawyer, which gets out, because he represented a couple of the mafia people,
Mm.
I'm going to crack the case wide open. I know what happened with the president, and it was not Oswald alone. I am able to go ahead and put all the pieces together as to what happened with regard to Marcello. And she also then showed the danger she was in. She told Mark Sinclair, if the wrong people know about what I know about the JFK assassination, it will cost me my life. I'm afraid for my life and my family. I bought a gun. I'm getting death threat. About less than a month later, she's dead.
Wow.
And under these mysterious circumstances, see, again, I didn't know anything about Dorothy Kilgallen. I had to research her. When she died, and you're gonna hear the fact, there was no investigation of her death. The official verdict was supposedly overdose of drugs, circumstances undetermined, whatever the hell that meant,
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't
right?
make any sense.
No. So anyway, she tells them that, and then not too long later, she's dead. Mark Sinclair walks into her townhouse on East 68th Street and ends up going upstairs to where she normally dressed, and she's not there. And so he goes into the bedroom, and she is found on a bed she never slept in, wearing clothes like she's going on a date. She's got her eyelashes, her hairpiece, and her makeup on.
Hmm.
There is a book on her lap, upside down. The air conditioner is on, even though it's freezing outside.
Yeah,
And
that
he
doesn't make any
goes
sense.
over, and it always gets me when I hear this because I have such respect for this woman. Should have never been killed. He goes over and touches her, and he knows she's dead. So he tells the butler and asks him to get a hold of the authorities. But for whatever reason, we're not exactly sure. Interviewed the butler's daughter. He waited a while. I think he was bewrought with the fact, if that's the right word, bewrought with the fact that she was dead. So finally, the authorities come in the afternoon after this raid that takes all of her documentation and all of her files and everything else.
While she's dead in the room, they come in and take all the information.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
yeah. No investigation of any kind. They send a first-year detective there. He glances at the table by the bed and he sees an empty Seconal bottle. And he says basically, oh my God, it's just another celebrity who's a druggie. So the medical examiner's office uh, at the time goes ahead and they supposedly are, which is interesting, by the way, they conducted an autopsy.
Okay, so
Well,
then
from
they
my
would
years as a
know.
criminal defense lawyer, you don't conduct an autopsy unless you think something's wrong.
Right.
But they're going to go ahead and do that. And they come back with that stupid verdict of overdose of drugs, circumstances undetermined. And unfortunately, then they feed that information to the media.
Of course.
And that's when Dorothy Kilgallen vanished, her name and everything vanished from the face of the earth. That's why I didn't know anything about her when I started investigating, 8 or 9 years ago, because they just, all that was cut off. Now, I've since, and in the new book, people will be fascinated with this. I interviewed 3 or 4 people who worked at the medical examiner's office, and what they told me is frightening. One person, a former deputy sheriff in an adjoining county, who worked at the medical examiner's office at the time, told me that, listen, it's not like mobster Joe Bonanno came into the office every day, but all of those working there were from Sicily,
Well,
Marcello.
yeah.
So he told me also about all the mix-ups with identifying bodies and everything else. Fortunately, one of them was Dr. Charles Umberger, who was at the autopsy and around there. And 2 years later, he had kept Dorothy's bodily fluids to do a new analysis at some point, but he had to wait because he was scared that the mafia might come after him. So he conducted another account of looking at those bodily fluids. In the autopsy, it says she died of one particular uh, uh, barbiturate seconal, which are sleeping pills.
Right.
Okay. He found Tulinol and phenobarbital in her
Hmm.
stomach. He found phenobarbital remnants on a glass right next to the bed. And he obviously knew that there was more to her death than it, because I had a pharmacologist go ahead and analyze what it would be like to have those 3 barbiturates in her system. And he said basically it's murder.
Yeah.
She would die from those. So that's information that people will enjoy in the book as far as what happened to her. And there's no interviews of these people at the ME office. Now you just have to stop and think again. If you are a member of the mafia and you want to have someone killed, you certainly don't do it yourself. You need someone else to do it. You need these patsies.
Hmm.
It was Oswald with the JFK assassination, and Jack Ruby as well, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
Dorothy had some feelings towards him being used. She met him at the Jack Ruby trial, as I said, and all that. So you've got Oswald and Jack Ruby there at the thing. So then, what do we look at with regard to what happened to Dorothy? Well, she had fallen in love with her marriage was estranged. Her husband was an alcoholic and
Hmm.
a playmaker with the women. So she had fallen in love with a Midwestern journalist named Ron Pataki. And he latched onto her. He was 20 years younger.
Oh, wow.
They had a love affair, but she made a huge mistake with him because she trusted him,
Mm.
and she shared with him her JFK assassination evidence. And we find out in the new book, and readers will find out, that he had some of the same problems that Sirhan had. He was a degenerate gambler. He had a lot of gambling debts. He was easily compromised. He had known a couple of the mafioso who knew Marcello. And I've been able to prove in the book that he is the one that went ahead and set up Dorothy Kilgallen uh, for for her death. Because the night before they met, well, the night actually of the death, they met at a hotel near her home, and she confronted him with leaking her material to what she called the wrong people.
Mm.
So he had the motive to save himself, and people who read the book will I think, be interested in how that goes forward because now you've got a patsy with JFK's death, and you've got a patsy, in my opinion, with regard to Ron Pataki. Now, they didn't kill him. They just scared the hell out of him, in my opinion, to keep his mouth shut, and he did.
Yeah.
The kicker in there is that there's a poem by Pataki that's in the book. And it basically talks about exactly how Dorothy Kilgallen would have been killed by being poisoned. It has a bartender. It talks about poisoning a vodka and vodka and tonic drink, which is exactly what she drank. It's all the facts that only somebody who orchestrated the death would know. Now, I interviewed Ron Pataki 2 or 3 times,
Oh, wow.
and I
Okay.
was convinced that he was the one who orchestrated her death. He kept lying about things. He didn't know about that. He wasn't there. He wasn't in New York and all that. Proved all of that wrong. And I finally said to him, Ron, listen, I see that you have gone to seminary, and I think it's because you have guilt about ending Dorothy Kilgallen, who loved you, by the way, her death. And there was a long pause. And I said, I want you to tell me what happened so that people know what happened. I won't say anything about this until you're dead, but I want
Perfect.
you to tell me. And he went ahead and he started to talk about it, and then he stumbled a little bit, and then he hung up. I'm
Because he's so
so
scared.
of such regret that I did not get all of that on tape or do something with it or whatever, but I didn't, and I'm sorry that I couldn't. So that's Dorothy Kilgallen and her situation. So I always say this to my wife after I write one of these books. That's it. I'm done. And she says, "Oh yeah, sure."
Because she knows
But
you better than that.
but maybe with you, Robert Kennedy's death had always intrigued me.
Hmm.
I could never believe, just as I never believed about Oswald, that he could possibly have done this alone. So again, I am not the smartest guy in the world, and I admit that. I nearly flunked out of Purdue University. It took me 5.5 years to get through law school. I'm not the smartest guy, but I am a plodder, and I will go after things and do everything I can. So at some point about a year ago, I decided, yeah, I'm going to look into Robert Kennedy's death, and my wife started laughing. And so I went ahead and what can I do here? I know Marcello has the strongest motive to have eliminated Robert Kennedy because why? He cannot let Robert Kennedy become president because he knows, and I proved this through some other evidence, that the first thing Robert Kennedy will do is come after Marcello because
And
he
he had
knows,
a pretty good chance of being president. Like he
oh
was,
yeah, he did. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, okay?
okay.
And so he knows that Bobby Kennedy is going to come after him because he knows that Marcello set up assassination of JFK. So how is he going to do something with this? He knows that Bobby Kennedy has just won the California primary, and so now he's really got some problems. But even before that, he had to try to figure out a way to get into the whole situation. And he learns about Sirhan from a gangster named Mickey Cohen, who, we'll go back for just a minute, Los Angeles gangster represented by Melvin Belli.
Mm.
So there's a connection there.
Yep.
So he starts to look into who can how can he get his connection out to Los Angeles. He looks into this Mickey Cohen, who was Belli's client, and finds out that he knew this basically, that Mickey Cohen was in charge of the underworld rackets and everything in Southern California, including the racetracks,
Perfect.
Santa Anita, Hollywood Park, and all of that. So at that time, Mickey Cohen is in prison. But as you know, many times those people can use their contacts outside. So he
Hmm.
starts to ask about what Cohen knows, and they find out about a man who had worked at Santa Anita Park, Santa Anita Racetrack, and his name is Sirhan. So what happens then is that I was able to find this videotape that is in the book. I mean, there's no, and we're going to talk about Carlos Marcello's confession in a little bit, but I found this video on YouTube uh, that's been up there for 4 years that nobody else seemed to think meant anything. And it is an account by a paddock captain at Santa Anita Racetrack, just south of Los Angeles. And what this gentleman says, and I'll kind of summarize it. But first, I want to give the credibility of this paddock captain. He was a hero because he had been working at Santa Anita Racetrack for years. But one day in I think it was the summer of '67, he's in the paddock area, and one of the horses gets loose, and there is a little girl, 5 years old, standing there, and the horse goes toward her, and this man puts himself in front of the horse and saves this little girl's life. It breaks every bone in his body.
Wow.
Has all these surgeries for a year. That's this man. And so I looked into this, and this man then, John Shears, his name, went ahead and I was able to find in this video that he worked there all those years. And then in the summer of 1968, a young man, I think it was in 67 or first part of '68, a young man comes into the racetrack and comes back to the paddock area and says to this man, John, I need a job. And John says, well, all we have is a hot walker, which means you walk the horses after the races. It pays $100, $200 a month, which is nothing back there then even. And the guy says, I'll take it. That was Sirhan. So John Shear then tells the story. He worked there for quite a while. He was rather meek. He was rather, he could easily be influenced.
Hmm.
He had some ill feelings towards Robert Kennedy because he was Palestinian and so on and so forth, and the Israeli thing, and we'll get into how that fits into everything. But he was a guy who could be easily manipulated. That was what John Shear
Mm.
says, and people can make up their own mind when they watch the video and the book. So he says, all right, well, he's there for a while, and he finally leaves. And just right before Robert Kennedy is killed in June of 1968, he and his wife are going to Hollywood Park, and they see Sirhan walking up some steps. And there's two big guys on either side of him, looking like they're kind of controlling him.
Yeah.
He called them hoodlums.
Mm.
And he said, I remember that they had been thrown out of Hollywood, thrown out of Santa Anita Racetrack. And the other thing he said is, he's dressed in a brand new suit, he has money, and the man is unemployed.
Yeah, and he
So
was
he's
making
very,
$200 a month.
so he's very quizzical about that.
Hmm.
And then what happens is the day that Robert Kennedy is, by the way, I've been given the explanation that Sirhan had somehow or another gone ahead and had some money from a medical settlement or something like that. But these are four crisp $100 bills that they find in his pocket when he's arrested. And I will tell you, to this day, nobody has ever been able to explain how that money was there or
Right.
about these two hoodlums. So Bobby Kennedy dies, and John Shear and his wife are watching LA television. And there's a mugshot, it's in the book, of Sirhan. Do you know this man? Because they didn't, or at least they said they didn't. The
Yeah.
authorities, the FBI and the LAPD. So his wife makes him call the authorities at Hollywood Park, which is nearby Santa Anita Racetrack, and he tells them his story, believing the FBI and the LAPD will go ahead and get in touch with him. He asks them to get in touch, gives them a phone number and everything. They never do. They never contact him once. And the kicker to that, which again leads us back to possible involvement by Marcello, Mafia, whatever.
Yeah.
He says on that tape, for the next year, every time my wife and I picked up the phone, we heard a click. And we
Mm.
knew our phones were being tapped, that somebody was listening in because they thought that we might know more about the whole Sirhan thing, and that. So then the thing that it really upset me, because I'm a former defense lawyer, criminal defense lawyer, is the fact that on purpose, in my opinion, one of the first lawyers for Sirhan represented a mafioso called Johnny Roselli,
Mm-hmm.
who is a compatriot of Marcello.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that happened with that lawyer and other ones was they just threw him to the wolves. He said he couldn't remember what happened. At one time, he said he thought, he'd been hypnotized. I mean, there was all this crazy stuff. At one point, he wanted to plead guilty, and the judge wouldn't take care of it. I mean, here's this little man being used, abuse of power by these people. And so, in the middle of the trial, one of his lawyers stands up. Well, our client is guilty of killing Robert Kennedy. Can you
What?
imagine that?
Wait, okay, okay. As a lawyer, though, is that like a normal thing? Would you just
Oh
stand up and be
no,
like, "Oh yeah,
never.
my
You would
client's
never
guilty"?
do that. I mean, there
What?
was no way that he wasn't going to be convicted, and he was pronounced that
Oh
they
my
wanted to
gosh.
kill him with the death penalty. Fortunately, California didn't have the death penalty, and so that didn't happen. But if you go on through that, what's fascinating about the whole Robert Kennedy situation is that when he was shot, on that evening in June, there wasn't any proper investigation. No
Of
proper
course.
investigation in JFK's death, Dorothy Kilgallen's death, and now in Robert Kennedy's death.
So did the
There were
authorities know that it was all set up?
no, oh no. Oh,
But they just like
oh,
they just
did they know?
accepted
Yeah, I
that.
think they did, but they didn't. J. Edgar Hoover knew about Oswald not being alone, and Ruby, and Hoover knew about Dorothy Kilgallen, that there was a plot to kill her, and the same thing with Robert Kennedy. But you see, those men who abuse power, they cannot let that happen. They
Of
they
course.
cannot let the American public know what happened. And I'm going to tell you in a little while how unfortunately we're having a recurrence of that today with a government body that was supposed to look into these assassinations and hasn't done so.
I have a question about Hoover really quick because like in my research I found that like LBJ had some like he wanted to be president, right? So that makes sense why he would be involved in JFK's death. But why Hoover? Why was he so involved with all these? Why was he like trying to cover everything up?
A smart person. Good question. Because J. Edgar Hoover, if if there are any plots, I'm going to use your C word, plots to kill these three people, then there is going to be some real problems with that because the FBI will be blamed for not stopping them,
And
especially with regard to JFK.
and
Okay?
he was the director of the FBI at the time.
Right. And
Mm.
so what does he do? The moment JFK dies, he has his staff and send out a communique. It's Oswald alone. It's Oswald alone. It's Oswald alone. Okay. And he goes ahead, and also the thing that really made a difference that I've proven in the books and a little more in the new one is that he basically has his agents steal John F. Kennedy's body.
Mm.
The autopsy of John F. Kennedy should have been in Dallas
Yeah, right away.
at Parkland Hospital. All right. And what we would find out, people will find out in the book that if that autopsy would have been done in Parkland, there's a great video, very informative video the Parkland doctors on YouTube where they discuss what happened. And each one of them, when they were looking at the wounds to JFK, said the shots came from the front,
Which
not the
doesn't
back.
work if Oswald was the murderer.
And I don't want to forget to talk about the shots that killed Robert Kennedy because
Yeah.
uh, Sirhan was in front of Bobby Kennedy.
Hmm.
The shots that killed him are in the back and in the neck. Now, people have said, well, he might have turned his head. Come on.
You're just
But with
like
J,
grasping at straws at that point.
let's go back to Hoover, though, okay?
Yeah.
So he gets rid of the body, it's sent east, and Dr. Cyril Wecht, who is, I believe, the most formidable forensic scientist who ever lived, unfortunately, God love him, he died about a year ago. He gave me an account out of 60,000 autopsies he conducted during his longevity with being a forensic expert and being in the media and everything. The JFK assassination autopsy is the worst one he ever saw because they went along, these uneducated military doctors went ahead and followed what they had to do to please J. Edgar Hoover. So, in my
Mm.
opinion, every time I go to Washington D.C. and I don't go there much anymore, and I see the LB, excuse me, the uh, J. Edgar Hoover Federal Building where the FBI is, I want to throw up. I mean,
So,
he was one of the worst people that ever lived because of him distorting histories with regard to all three of these deaths, for sure.
oh, absolutely. But okay, I have a couple more questions about that because nobody ever I mean, not never, but the suspicion wasn't on the FBI. It was on the CIA the whole time.
Well, I wouldn't agree completely with that. I
Okay.
don't think so because he really looked at Oswald alone.
Yeah.
Okay, that was his way of stopping anything that was going on. And so
Okay.
I'm not so sure, but I'm going to mention this. I usually mention it at the end of the interview, but I'm mentioning it right now. What happened here and how is this relevant? All these things happened 60 years ago, okay?
Hmm.
I'm going to talk about Dorothy's ceremony in New York City recently that I went to honoring her, but 60 years ago. So people ask me, although I do hear from a lot of young people, okay, why is this relevant? It's relevant because nobody asked questions back then. We basically took it as gospel what the government was telling us. J.
Hmm.
Edgar Hoover must be telling us the truth about that, about Dorothy's death, about Robert Kennedy. They didn't ask the questions. And I say to people, the relevance is for people who are watching my presentations or read the book, you have to ask questions these days, especially in this environment.
Yeah.
And you can't, if you don't, then you got nothing to gripe about. And if you don't vote, you've got nothing to gripe about. And that's the relevance of all of this because the only one person that spoke up about JFK's assassination was Dorothy Kilgallen. And she should have been at the Warren Commission testifying. They wouldn't let her. There's some other evidence that she knew about that at least and she tried to give it to them. They didn't want it. I've had that happen with authors of books through the years who want nothing to do with my research because they are still Oswald alone proponents. And it's unfortunate. And that's what I'm going to talk about in a little bit with this task force that was convened to look into the assassinations and Dorothy's death. And the same thing occurred. So I hear what you're saying about about J. Edgar Hoover. But for the most part, he never looked at the mafia for sure. He never looked at the CIA at that time. He never looked at the Cubans. He never looked at anything else. The industrial complex.
He just
Anybody,
wanted it
any
to be
other
nice and neat.
ideas. It was all Oswald alone.
Hmm.
And if you think about it, we look at that as absolutely ludicrous that he could have set up everything like this. But back then, hey, the government's telling us the truth, and so we need to look no further. Sad, but true.
Yeah.
So with regard to back to Bobby Kennedy's death, there's no investigation whatsoever. And yet I kept wondering about it. So I was able then to connect Marcello in with Sirhan.
Hmm.
And so what I then did was to look at what was Robert Kennedy's assessment of what happened to his father. His father, by the way, the moment that J. Edgar Hoover called him and said, your brother is dead, the JFK, the president, Bobby Kennedy said to several of his closest associates at the Justice Department, it's the guy from New Orleans. It's
Oh,
the
so he
guy
knew
who
right
killed.
away.
He knew for sure. Of course he did, because he knew that they double crossed the mafia,
Hmm.
including Marcelo, sending to Central America and everything. So he knew that. So Bobby Kennedy Jr. then, went along with that uh, conclusion for years. And then all at once, I saw him on some interviews saying, no, 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 it was the CIA. And I have all of this evidence to prove it and everything,
I was
without,
gonna
of
ask about that
course,
too. Yeah.
providing any of that evidence, because that was okay. So, that's what happened there with RFK Jr. But what interested me most was that through the years, I think I have it right here, because I wrote a letter to RFK that was delivered to him on Monday. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Through the years, Robert Kennedy Jr. has said on occasion, let me find it here, there are too many bullets that were fired. You can't fire 13 shots out of an 8-shot gun, because Sirhan did have a gun and shot, but he shot at the ceiling and so on and so forth that way. I spent 3 hours visiting Sirhan in prison late last year. This was in 2017, after researching my father's assassination for months. I got to a place where I had to see Sirhan. I went there because I was curious and disturbed what I had seen in the evidence. I've been a strong advocate for the release of Sirhan v. Sirhan since I learned of the evidence that wasn't presented at trial. After years of careful investigation, I arrived at the conviction that the story of my father's murder is not as cut and dried as portrayed at trial. And then there's a book written by Lisa Peace, who was a very almost a confidant of Robert Kennedy Jr. She wrote a book, A Lie Too Big to Fail, about Sirhan visiting Sirhan, or Bobby Kennedy visiting Sirhan in the company of Sirhan's attorney. Bobby hugged Sirhan
Hmm.
and told him he knew he hadn't killed his father, and that he considered Sirhan as much a victim as his father. Bobby told me, the author said, he told me, he's a sweet man. Can you imagine? He's a sweet man.
Right.
And Bobby took the time to learn the truth, and what he found out moved him to action, and rightfully so. And one more. I am disturbed that the wrong person might have been convicted of killing my father. He was the chief law enforcement officer in this country. I think it would have disturbed him if somebody was put in prison for a crime they didn't commit. So in 2021, maybe you remember reading this, Robert Kennedy Jr. Went to the parole board of California.
Hmm.
He tried to persuade them to get a release, a parole for Sirhan,
Hmm.
and that was successful. It was announced that Sirhan, after nearly 60 years in prison for
Wow.
a crime I don't believe he committed, and we'll talk about it a bit more if you want, at 80 years old, had served enough time in prison and would be released. And then we had our political governor, Gavin Newsom. He never wanted that to be on his resume, that he went ahead and released what most people believed was Robert Kennedy's assassination, and
Hmm.
so he revoked that parole,
Oh,
which is
wow. I didn't
just,
know that.
it's stressful, absolutely. So that's where it stood. And then I went ahead and I wrote this book, and the more I wrote it, the more incensed I became, because in my opinion, based on all of the new evidence, there's new ballistic evidence in there. There's John Shear's account. There's all of this other, he wasn't represented as he should have been, everything. I decided I was going to do something about it. And this past Monday, I sent a letter to Robert Kennedy Jr. in
Hmm.
Washington, D.C. It was delivered. And I asked him to go ahead and look into all the evidence. I sent him the letter with all my evidence and everything else like that, and pointed him to that. And I said, it's time for you to take some action here, because I know you believe that Sirhan was not accountable for your father's death. I hope that you will go ahead and you will take the evidence and you will go to the President of the United States and you will ask him to pardon Sirhan, or in the least, at least, to give him a new trial, release him, whatever, commute the sentence, whatever it is that way. Now, I knew that was a long shot, and I know it's a long shot,
Yeah.
because RFK Jr.'s got a lot of other problems to deal with, as a member of the cabinet. But you got to try things at times, and I'm a fighter,
Absolutely.
and I believe that I wanted to do that. Now, somebody has pointed out, and this is the easy way out, in my opinion. The President of the United States cannot cannot pardon Sirhan Sirhan because Sirhan Sirhan did not commit a federal crime.
Mm.
Well, listen,
Wait a second.
the President of the United States has been pardoning everybody but his sister for anything that he wants to pardon them for. The people who were involved in the January 6th,
Yeah.
assault on
Hmm.
the Capitol, it doesn't matter. So if Robert Kennedy goes to the President of the United States, and I don't know if I'll hear from him or not, I hope I will, but I'll keep pressing it.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I've got some friends who are going to try to do that too. And he goes to the President of the United States and says, I want this man paroled. It will happen in an instant.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know if it'll be successful.
So I have a question about Saran Saran. So like, why would he be the patsy? Like, did the mafia end up like taking care of his debts? Did they take care of his family? Like, why would he give up the rest of his life to be in prison to be the patsy for this? If like for what?
I think excellent questions. You're very, very perceptive. I think two or three things. One, they could have threatened him for
Yeah,
sure. Okay. Second, they could give him money, which is that way.
but that
But I
wouldn't
think
make any
it was
sense
more of the
because
fact that it was the gambling debts.
okay.
Because you go back to Ron Pataki, who I didn't mention, I guess, was involved in Dorothy's deaths. He had gambling debts as well. See,
Hmm.
these people are perfect subjects to be, and also look at what John Shear said, easily manipulated.
Yeah.
They also knew that he didn't care for Bobby Kennedy because of some things with Israel and stuff like. So he's in a situation where I think he was easily recruited, I think is the word. And unfortunately, it just swelled. And I think they told him that, you can go to the hotel. One more thing. Gosh, Mark, don't leave this out. This is so important. Sorry. And then I'll get back to your question, or
No,
you
that's
can
okay.
tell me if I haven't answered it. Mickey Cohen,
Yeah.
Marcello's buddy in Los Angeles. I found a book he wrote, and I corroborated it with other evidence. He ended up handling all the gambling in Los Angeles, including at the Ambassador Hotel,
Mm.
where Bobby Kennedy was shot. And he says in the book, I got to know how everything worked at the hotel, where things were, and so on and so forth. And I just found, I don't think I have the document, I just found an FBI document that was exposed by the New York Times in 1965, where an FBI agent talked about the fact there are many holes in the Sirhan Sirhan case. We should have looked more into it, and so on and so forth. And one of the things he said is we should have looked into Mickey Cohen knowing exactly where Robert Kennedy would be when he was shot after
Yeah.
he made his speech, and that why was Sirhan Sirhan in the kitchen at that point? It looks like he was told to be there.
Hmm.
So all of that fits together, you see, in the ability to go ahead. If you look at these three deaths in context of each other,
Yeah.
and I just want to, unless did that answer your question?
I think that I kind of got the answer. I think that what makes the most sense to me in my head is that they would either be like, okay, you have all these gambling debts, you can either die or you can just be a patsy for us and go to prison. Like
Yeah, and
that to me
remember,
makes the most
yeah,
sense.
and remember the two hoodlums that are with him
Hmm.
when he's going to Hollywood Park. I think it may have been threats to him or
Yeah,
whatever. But Dorothy Kilgallen is the linchpin to the three deaths. She's in the middle, okay, in 65 and everything. And I have fought to get an investigation of her death for several years. I've come really close with the previous district attorney in New York City. He was going to do it, and then I met with him. I met with the chief of police in New York City. Shook my hand. We're going to do it. They never did.
of course.
I will keep trying to get her an investigation. But she is the linchpin between all of this. And Dorothy, as I said, when she died, almost disappeared from the face of the earth. And I'm very proud of the fact that through my books, the bestseller, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, Denial of Justice, the other books, that she kind of came back to life and people got to know about her more.
Yeah,
In fact,
absolutely.
to the point where now, What's My Line reruns, 80 of them are up on Prime Video.
Oh, perfect.
So she's gotten a lot of uh, her exposure back. But about a month ago, A city councilman in New York City who had tried to help me get an investigation of Dorothy's death sent me a text. Mark, you need to come back to New York City on November 8th, the 60th anniversary of Dorothy's death, because we are going to co-name a street after Dorothy Kilgallen.
Oh, that's nice.
And I said, that is an incredible tribute. I
Yeah.
probably started crying at that point. I was so happy. So that is what happened. And this is the flyer that they sent out, but I'll read from it. But this is at East 68th Street and Park Avenue. Dorothy lived on 68th Street. I stood right in front of the building where she lived, 45 East 68th Street, on November 8th of this year. And I gave a talk, and the councilman gave a talk, and a couple of people who knew Dorothy gave a talk. And basically, what they said about her is, join us as we honor the extraordinary legacy of Dorothy Kilgallen, pioneering journalist, author, and fearless voice for the truth. Dorothy's groundbreaking career in print and television broke barriers for women in media, and her commitment to investigative reporting made a lasting impact on American journalism. And then they had a program that they gave out, which talked about the fact that she may have been the first journalist to ever combine radio, television, and print, which
Wow.
was the predecessor to what we have now,
Yeah.
and all of that. So we had that ceremony. The people who read the book will see that in there. They can go to YouTube. There's some video of that happening. But it was an incredible, a moment for me and for Dorothy, who I believe was smiling that day, because it validated this woman who went ahead and, in fact, gave up her life for trying to solve the JFK assassination for sure. And when people ask me why is she the one that should be most read about, listened to, and everything, I say, well, she's the most credible, and you know why? Her enemies killed her.
That's how you know she's on the right track. That's for sure.
Exactly. So that was Dorothy. So I hope that if you get a chance, I know you're very, very busy, but look at that part at least of the book about Dorothy, because it's very inspiring.
Yeah.
And she just would not say no early on in her life, and then all the way to the day she died.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like I'm very inspired by her. Don't know. I know only her story from what you've told me, but I really want to look into her more. And I actually now want to do a whole episode on her just because I find that I learn best when I do a full episode on somebody because I've done all the research into it now. So, yeah, I'm gonna add her to my list for sure.
If you get a chance, go to the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. That link is in the book, the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. It's all about Dorothy.
And I'll link that in the show notes too. That way anybody that's listening can easily
Yeah,
click on that. And
yeah,
I'll link the markshawbooks.com as well.
that would be fine. I'd appreciate it very much. But yeah, I think once you read some of the material and you see the videos with Dorothy and all of that, like you, I'm going to say this because I did look up a little bit about you. You're a woman of the truth, and that's exactly what she was. And I don't know if you feel like at times that you put yourself at risk by some of the people who watch your broadcasts. But that's part of the deal. That's what I do. I get terrible emails from people about leave the Kennedys alone, Mark, and yet that's part of the job, as we know, right?
Absolutely. It
For
100%
sure.
is. I get lots of things. I just don't read them. Like people will leave nasty comments or reviews and I just don't read all that.
Exactly. Good, good.
So, Mark, do you have anything else that you feel like I didn't ask that I should have asked about the Kennedys, about Dorothy, about anything?
No, I'm very impressed by you. I really am. Thank
Thank
you. I
you.
really am. And I'll tell the people at the PR firm. And in fact, I don't know if you have a boss, but if you do, I like to write letters to people thanking them for what a professional job you did and how great you were with your questions and all of that. But apparently, you must be your own boss.
I am my own
So what I'm
boss.
telling you, I'm telling you how impressed I am by you. So thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate that. And until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and we will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast written, hosted, and produced by me, Danny Mercy. Special thanks to Lindsay for research and writing. If you love the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening. Follow us on social media at rabbit.holepodcast and visit our website at stayskeptical.com for everything else.